Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's book-to-show comparison for the Expanse Season 4, Episode 7, A Shot in the Dark. This video is a part of a series of videos where I compare the Expanse TV show to that of its source material, pointing out the differences and giving my opinion on how well I think these adaptations work. So to start with a spoiler warning for The Expanse up to Season 4, Episode 7. If you haven't seen up to this point, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. However, if you haven't read the novels, not to worry, this video will not contain future spoilers beyond Season 4. So our episode begins on Illis, where we see the alien structure where Holden and all the people on Illis are hiding, and it's still underwater. We see Elvie examining some of the belters where while Carol Chiwiwi rations out water to them as they huddle under blankets and against walls for warmth. A fight breaks out over some water, which Chiwiwi breaks up immediately. We then see Holden and Amos walking through the corridor as they talk to Alex and Naomi on the Rocinante. Naomi sadly reports that it will be several days before the water recedes. Holden asks her if there's any chance of fixing the engines, but Alex reports that the fusion just isn't working, to which Holden replies, "Fucking Miller." Holden asks how long the ships can stay in orbit before they crash, and Naomi answers that the Rossi and the Israel can maintain orbit for as long as 5 weeks, but it will only be 2 days before the Barbara Bacola begins to lose orbit. Chiwiwi then approaches Holden to inform them that they only have enough water purifying tablets to last for 1 day. Holden reminds her of what happened to the shuttle to emphasize that they can't send down for more supplies. He suggests that perhaps they could parachute down some supplies, but not until the water recedes, and Chiwiwi asks what she can do to help, but Holden doesn't have an answer for her, so she leaves in frustration, feeling helpless. So in the novels, as I mentioned in previous videos, there was no tsunami and the alien structure was open-ended and at ground level, so people weren't as stuck in it as they are here. In fact, they hide inside to get away from the powerful storms, but once those storms have passed, they went outside again. However, at this stage, the settlement had been completely wiped off the face of the planet, along with any other man-made structure, so they remained inside the alien structure. But it's funny that in the show Holden mentions the possibility of parachuting supply drops, because that's exactly what they did do in the books. In fact, many search teams had to go out to retrieve them as the strong winds would push them away from the alien structure. So they are not as low on supplies in the novels as they are here, although supplies are still scarce in the books, just not as scarce. Also, they don't have to worry about water because Elvie had brought a machine with her that can make drinking water. In fact, when Chiwiwi said the line about running out of water purifying tablets, I was just like, oh, why don't you just use Elvie's water making machine? But then I remembered that was actually the books and not the show. So all in all, the situation wasn't as dire in the books, although at this stage they had already encountered the death slugs, but I'll get into them shortly. Also here, Holden says "fucking Miller" as if he blames him for the ship's losing power, but in the novels, Miller tells Holden directly that he's not responsible for doing that and he's just as helpless against the planet's defenses as he is. Of course, having things be more bleak and dire does ramp up the tension level, so I'm going to give this a +1. So next we see Murtry and Wei meeting with the security teams to inform them they could be stuck down there for days and supplies are scarce, but he wants to ensure that only RCE personnel have access to their supplies and equipment. One of the security men warns that he spotted some belters eyeing their equipment, and Murtry re-emphasizes to protect their equipment at all costs. And Wei adds that they should be smart about it, as the belters outnumber them, so let them bring the fight to the RCE before responding. So in the novels, they didn't really focus on Mercury trying to protect his supplies from the Belters. As I mentioned, they were getting supplies parachuted in, so supplies weren't in such high demand. For example, here Mercury talks about how the Belters will certainly die from lack of supplies, and that wasn't the case in the novels. However, Mercury did bitch to Holden about how the Belters were living off of his supplies, but only so he could get some of the Belters to help him build a structure. There wasn't this implied war over resources, but it does make sense for the story that the show set up, and further, it does raise the stakes and tension level, so I'm going to give this a +1. Meanwhile, on the Rocinante, we see Alex and Naomi strategizing on what to do about the Barber Bacola when Lucia comes in and asks if the barb only has 2 days left. Alex confirms it. He then shows Lucia a map of the parameter of moons surrounding the planet, which he believes is creating the effect that has paralyzed their ships, so if they get beyond it, they should be okay. So Lucia asks if they and the barb are going to head that way, but Naomi replies that the barb couldn't make that trip, so this is only the last resort. But Alex assures her that they're not leaving anyone on the barb to die, and if that happens, they'll rescue everyone off of the ship first. But Lucia insists that without the lithium, they might as well be dead, as they need it to keep the colony alive. So in the novels, they had actually estimated that the Barber Bacola had 8 days before it fell out of orbit. However, Alex recrunches the numbers and finds that it's actually 5 days, which freaks out Basia, and he goes to Alex to complain. But Alex assures him that it's not going to happen and that they will save the barb. But he convinces Basia that they need Naomi in order to do that, so he talks Basia into going onto the Edward Israel to rescue her, which is a whole thing, and they focus a bit more on that than trying to rescue the barb. And it does seem to me to be a bit manipulative of Alex, the way that Alex used Basia's worry about losing his daughter to get him to risk his life to try to rescue Naomi, while Alex just sits comfortably on the Rocinante. Plus, I like how the focus is more on how to save the Barber Bacola, so I'm going to give this a +3. Back on Ellis, Mercury catches up with Holden to have a chat with him. Mercury's worried about the Belters getting restless, so Holden suggests he share his supplies with them, but he refuses. Instead, he suggests that they work on evacuating everyone off the planet as soon as possible, and offers Holden his help to make that happen, but Holden tells him there's nothing he can do. Mercury asks about Miller, but Holden explains that he hasn't heard from him, so he discounts Miller as an option. Just then, Elvie shows up while looking for Holden, but says it's a good thing that Mercury's there too, and tells them both about an alien bacteria that has infected everyone's eyes and is causing everyone to go blind. Mercury protests that she had said that it was just allergies, but Elvie explains that she was just telling people that to prevent a panic. She says she's examined everyone and they all have it, but Holden's the last one to be examined, so she examines him twice and finds that he doesn't have it. The fact that he's immune is a big deal and might help her solve this thing. However, when Holden asks her how long until everyone goes blind, she answers a day, which shocks Holden that it's moving that quickly. Mercury emphasizes to her that solving this crisis is the top priority. So first off, in the novels, Holden never told anyone about Miller, so Mercury wouldn't be asking about him. Further, Miller didn't disappear in the novels and was still in contact with Holden, but answers that there's nothing he can do to stop the current situation as it's beyond his control. Miller suggests going north to a blind spot that he wants to investigate, and suggests that perhaps it's the answer to powering down the planet's current defenses, but Holden is too busy to go. As far as the blindness goes, Elvie didn't wait to tell everyone about it in the novels like she does here, so it was actually there was actually some time in between when they first figured out they were going blind to when she discovered that Holden was immune. In fact, when they did discover Holden was immune, he refused to stay and help because he was too busy collecting supplies and keeping the death slugs away. Also, when Elvie first revealed that Holden was immune, she started out by saying that he was very special, which he misunderstood to mean that she was hitting on him because she had been flirting with him this whole time, but she had actually slept with Fayez the night before, and so she was actually over her crush on him. Anyway, I thought the scene was really dumb, like a romantic comedy cliche. Like, why tell him he's very special? Why not just say, hey, you're immune? Although I do prefer the book's version of Miller sticking around, I'm not sure why the show had him disappear like that, but I'm very glad they got rid of that silly rom-com scene, so I'm going to give this a +3. So then we see Amos strike up a conversation with a young Belter kid who lost his parents in the shockwave. Amos tells him that it was his parents' job to keep him safe, but he complains that they're not there anymore. Amos then notices green stuff in his eyes and asks about it, and the boy simply says it doesn't hurt. Wei then walks into the room, and Amos points to her and asks the boy if he sees the pretty lady, but he says he doesn't, that all he sees is green. Amos squeezes his hand and tells him it's all going to be okay. So we didn't get a scene like this in the novels. In fact, Amos refused to stay inside with the others, instead choosing to stay outside to work on repairing the carts. When Holden told him to go inside, he refused, saying that he didn't want to be around a bunch of people complaining that he would end up hitting them because of this. But this scene is in the spirit of Amos's goodwill toward children, so I'm going to give this a +1. So then Amos and Wei hear yelling coming from the hallway, so they run in that direction to find two RCE security men roughing up one of the Belters who they accuse of trying to steal their water. It becomes violent and they tackle the Belter to the ground, but Murtry comes in yelling at them to stand down and eventually physically removes them from the fight. He then helps the Belter to his feet and gives him the water. When they're alone, Wade tells Amos that this is only going to get worse, that eventually some of the Belters will die, and Amos agrees that some people always die in situations like these. So, in the novels, we never really got a fight like this or squabbles over resources to the point, because at this point the death slugs had already been introduced and people were more worried about them. Also, there was no talk about how some people were going to have to die of lack of supplies as the death slugs were thinning them out, and again, people were more worried about that. I like the book's version, but this version makes more sense for the story the show set up and explores more of the tension between the two factions, so I'm going to give this a +1. So we then go into orbit where we see Felsia on the Barbacola making some necessary repairs as Naomi is on the comm from the Rosinante talking her through it. Naomi tells her that this hands-on experience she's getting is more educational than going to university, but Felsia just tells Naomi that she sounds like her mother. Naomi tells her that her mother isn't wrong. She then tells Felsia how much her mother regrets what she's done and that she didn't mean to hurt anyone, but Felsia remains unmoved. Naomi tells her about her own experiences about the need to run away, which she did, and she regretted it ever since, and doesn't want to have her make the same mistakes. So we never got a scene like this in the novels, as Felsia wasn't angry at her criminal parent as she is here. In addition, Naomi was still being held prisoner on Edward Israel at this stage, so wouldn't be talking to her. Also, Felsia was just a passenger on the Barbacola, so she wouldn't be making repairs like this. Also, I understand the show is trying to flesh out this character more. I don't think it's entirely necessary, and further, I don't think it makes sense how the show treats Felsia as if she were the Barbacola's only crew. So I'm going to give this a -2. So then we see Holden submitting some blood scans for Elvie to examine to try to come up with a cure, and they try to speculate on what makes Holden different from everyone else, and Elvie brings up the fact that he talks to an alien being inside his head. Holden mentions how he would do anything to make it stop, and Elvie gets upset, saying that it's a blessing, as she's traveled a very long distance just to study lower alien life forms, where he has a direct line of communication with an advanced alien life form, and yet he's just annoyed by it. Holden tries to argue that it's different when you have no choice, but Elvie just says that any scientist would kill to trade places with him, including herself. So in the novels, Elvie did give Holden some blood work, but at this stage she was in advanced stages of losing her eyesight, and it wasn't just her. Fayez and Lucia were also helping her treat people and run tests. As for Miller, in the novels, Elvie didn't know about him and therefore never expressed envy over it. Though I do think what she says here makes a lot of sense from her perspective, so I'm going to give this a +1. So Holden then goes to Amos and retrieves some medicine from his first aid kit, and when Amos asks him why, Holden tells him about the bacterial infection and how everyone will go blind in a day. Amos is obviously in shock and terrified of this, but Holden sincerely tells him that he needs his help to keep everyone calm and to ensure that there isn't a panic. He tells Amos that he can't do this without him, and Amos agrees to help. So in the novels, we didn't really get a scene like this. Amos kind of found out about the blindness the same time as everyone else, and Holden never asked for his help to keep everyone calm. But I think this was a much more solid and character-building moment than those we got in the novels between Amos and Holden, and it went a long way to show how strong their relationship has grown, so I'm going to give this a +3. So back on the Rocinante, we see Alex approach Lucia in the mess hall, admiring the walls of the plants that are there, and she says it reminds her of Ganymede, and Alex explains that the man who put them in was from Ganymede, and he went back there to rebuild. Lucia is obviously feeling sad about her daughter and how her life is in danger, and how she's refusing to talk to her. Alex then tells Lucia about his own experience on how he lost his family by neglecting them and not paying enough attention to them. He says that it's too late for him, but not for her. As if they can rebuild the mirrors on Ganymede, that she can rebuild her relationship with her family. But Alex, mentioning the mirrors, gives Lucia an idea on how to save the barb that she takes to Naomi, who says it sounds a bit risky, as she wants the Rocinante to tow the barb out of orbit, which Naomi had considered and rejected. But Lucia suggests using a net from the barb, fashioning them into cables to connect the two ships. So in the novels, Alex had a similar heart-to-heart with Bozia, who is also worried about never seeing his family again, and Alex also relates it to his own experience with his family, although in the novels he didn't have a son, just an ex-wife. However, in the show, Alex's story is reassuring, meant to give Lucia hope, whereas in the novels, Alex's story to Bozia could be more described as tough love, as he told Bozia that he fucked up and that he needs to own that shit because he dishonors his family when he doesn't. As for Lucia, as for her idea to save the barb, not much time is actually spent on coming up with this idea in the novels. In the novels, they just go straight to implementing this idea, and it is not as hard to do. They don't need to fashion cables out of nets. They just have them, and this was Naomi's idea that she came up with after they rescued her from the Edward Israel. Now, I'm a bit torn on this one, as Alex's tough love was a bit more impactful. I also thought it was uncalled for, and I preferred his more caring touch here. However, Lucia's aha moment was a bit cliche, coming up with a solution because someone said one word that's only loosely related. So I'm going to split the difference and give this a 0. So Naomi then calls Felcia on the barbacola to tell her of this idea, but as soon as Felcia sees Lucia in the shot, she gets upset and tells Naomi that she doesn't want to speak to her mother, but Naomi asks her to hear her out as she has a plan to save them. So Lucia steps forward and tells her plan to tow the barb out of orbit. Felcia says that it may work if they build structures to help balance the ship, and the captain of the barb looks over her shoulder in approval. So they go to implement this plan. So in the novels, we never get a scene like this. Felcia never behaves as the barb's engineer or captain, and we just jump straight to implementing this plan. So in this scene, Felcia is kind of acting like the ship's engineer or the ship's captain should act, while the actual captain just stands in the background smiling and giving her the thumbs up. Why? Well, this is a conversation that really should be that they should be having with him, the captain, or the actual crew of the ship, which surely the ship has a crew. Felcia need not talk to her mother at all if she doesn't want to, because she doesn't even need to hear this plan. They should have went straight to the captain with this plan, so I still don't understand why an uneducated 12-year-old girl is running the ship. This makes no sense to me, so I'm going to give this a -4. So then we get a scene with Mercury and Wei where Mercury tells her that they need to reach out to the Belters and share their supplies because with them all going blind, that puts them at a disadvantage as the Belters outnumber them. He tells Wei that if they don't tread carefully, they could all be killed, but if they do this right, they could accomplish in one day what would have taken them years to do, and that the planet could be theirs. However, Wei brings up the fact that Holden promised to support the Belters' claim to the world. Mercury replies that he's not going to leave this up to the court, and that Holden can't survive to leave the planet. He tells Wei that they're going to make 1% off of the riches of the planet, which would have been a lot with the lithium, but if they include all the alien technology that Holden activated, it could make them all filthy rich. He asks Wei if she's with him, and Wei tells him he never had to buy her loyalty before, but Mercury agrees but says her off-duty activities have given him reason to doubt her. But she tells him that Amos won't be a problem. So in the novels, we never get a scene like this where Mercury was plotting to kill Holden. Although Mercury wasn't a viewpoint character, the viewpoint characters we had on Illis were Holden and Elvie, and Mercury wouldn't have shared any plans to kill Holden in front of either of them. However, it doesn't seem like Mercury would plot to kill Holden, as he was more like all business and perhaps would kill Holden if Holden directly threatened him, but I don't think Book Mercury would plot to kill him like this. Now, later in the novels, Mercury would try to seize control of the alien technology, although it's never explicitly stated that he's doing it to get rich. He's more doing it to strengthen RCE, but that would in turn make him rich, sure. But in the novels, it was never explicitly stated to be about personal monetary gain as it is here. And of course, as I mentioned before, it was never stated Mercury was aware of Wei's relationship with Amos, so he never questioned her loyalty. Although she was never really portrayed to be his second as she is here. But all in all, this all works for what the show established, plus it does raise the stakes knowing that Mercury wants Holden dead, so I'm going to give this a +1. So next we see one of the RCE security men looking for his friend. He finds him face down in the puddle, dead. This was the same man who was arguing with the Belter earlier, so he assumes that the Belter killed him, so he goes and grabs the Belter and brings him back to the puddle, where he pulls his gun on him and starts drowning him. Holden, Amos, Mercury, Way, and a crowd gather by where this is happening, and they yell at him to stop. Amos tells him that if the Belter dies, he dies too, and Mercury eventually yells at him that if he doesn't stop, he'll shoot him himself. So he stops, and the Belter comes up for air, but he's covered in these neon green slugs, and then he starts choking and then dies. Everyone's puzzled by this until they see several slugs falling from the hole in the ceiling, until one falls on the security man, and then the security man promptly dies as well. Everyone's confused until Holden points out that it's the slugs that killed them. Mercury asks where they're coming from, and Holden shines his light on the roof to reveal hundreds of slugs crawling all over it, and he answers everywhere. So in the novels, the reveal of the death slugs happened earlier, and it wasn't as eventful. Holden and Amos first saw them when they went out to check the settlement when the storms first subsided, and they see a whole bunch of them. But when Elvie sees several slugs next to Holden, she freaks out and starts kicking them away. Holden is confused by this until Elvie reveals that a Belter in the alien structure died when he picked one of the slugs up as it was crawling on a wall near where he was sleeping. And so she deduced that the slugs are poisonous to humans. After the RCE men and Belters alike work to get rid of the slugs and to build trenches around the alien structure to keep the slugs out. But I must say, this reveal that builds off of the mistrust that the RCE team has of the Belters it was much more effective in ramping up the tension, and this scene portrayed exactly how dangerous these slugs were in a horror type fashion that was very effective. So I'm going to give this a +5. So my final adaptation score for A Shot in the Dark is a +14. Overall, I think the show does a better job of ramping up the tension and portraying just how desperate their situation is, and it focuses more on how the conflict between the RCE team and the Belters continues in this desperate situation, which makes things even worse. And it's all topped off with the awesome reveal of the Death Slugs, which was most effective. So that's it for my book-to-show comparison for The Expanse Season 4, Episode 7. I'll be back for my book-to-show comparison for Episode 8 in about 2 weeks, so be sure to keep an eye out for that. Also, check out my channel as I continue to do more videos on The Expanse, as well as covering other shows like Picard, Better Call Saul, Star Trek, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.